For years, people kept asking why the world's most fearless action star could sprint straight into danger, but somehow couldn't walk toward his own daughter. Now at 19, Suri Null, the girl everyone once knew as Suri Cruz, has finally broken her silence. She's not out here doing interviews or sitting on talk shows. Nah, she's speaking through the life she chose to build far away from her father's shadow. And what that life reveals, it's heavier, sadder, and way more painful than anyone ever imagined. This is the truth she's been carrying solo for over a decade. The day everything started falling apart. When Suri looks back, she can trace every crack to a moment she was way too young to understand. She was born on April 18, 2006, at St. John's Health Center in Santa Monica. A birth wrapped not in celebration, but in silence. Her mother, Katie Holmes, followed Scientology's silent birth expectations, holding back every sound of pain while men in black suits stood in the room, watching and enforcing rituals she never chose. Tom Cruise called it devotion. Katie called it survival. And for Suri, it became the first memory she never asked for. A beginning shaped by rules she would spend her whole childhood trying to outrun. In her earliest years, Suri lived inside a world designed to look flawless from the outside. Red carpets, magazine covers, private estates, security teams, the perfect Hollywood family image. But behind closed doors, cracks were already spreading. Katie's parents were deeply alarmed by the growing influence surrounding their daughter and granddaughter. Friends noticed Katie rarely went anywhere alone, always surrounded by Scientology associates who moved like silent shadows, monitoring her steps like she was living under low-key surveillance. Still, Suri didn't know any of that. What she knew were footsteps in the hallway, movie nights with her parents, warm arms lifting her up, a father who felt larger than life. But when she turned 6, the footsteps stopped. The house went quiet, and the man who once held her hand on the streets of New York suddenly vanished from her daily world. June 2012 became the year everything flipped. Her mother filed for divorce just days before Tom Cruise's 50th birthday in what became one of Hollywood's fastest and most shocking splits. To the world, it looked like celebrity drama. To a 6-year-old girl, it felt like half her universe disappeared without warning. And Suri didn't scream. She didn't break down. She just went quiet. Because kids don't need full explanations to know when someone they love is gone. Katie Holmes, silent va. After the divorce filing, people thought she made some bold, sudden move. But the real truth, the truth Suri only understood years later, was that Katie had been planning her escape with military-level precision. Behind those polished magazine smiles, she was living in constant fear. She changed phones over and over, avoided certain hallways in their own house because she believed they were monitored, replaced staff she suspected were reporting back to the Church of Scientology. And every single night, she held her daughter tighter, terrified that one wrong move could cost her custody. Katie chose New York as her battleground because she knew its laws favored a parent protecting a child's stability. She filed while Tom was in Iceland filming Oblivion, making sure he wouldn't see it coming. And he didn't. He found out the same way the world did, through headlines. For a man who spent decades controlling his public image down to the last detail, that hit hard. Court documents later revealed the one thing Katie fought for above everything else: the right to raise Suri outside Scientology. Former members claimed Katie feared that as Suri grew older, she could be pushed into the church's strict SEAR program, a place she believed no child should ever be forced into. To stop that future, she was ready to sacrifice her career, friendships, safety, and every bit of privacy she had left. No hositashchen. By July 2012, just 11 days after filing, the divorce was finalized. Tom agreed to pay around $400,000 a year in child support, cover medical and educational expenses, and accept that Katie would have full custody. But money was never the goal. Freedom was. The very next day, she and Suri left Los Angeles like ghosts, slipping into a new life in New York City with a few suitcases and a prayer that distance would protect them. For Suri, that move felt like waking up in a world where her father existed everywhere on screens, posters, newspapers, but not in the seat next to her. Growing up with an invisible father. For most kids, memories of their dad come from bedtime stories, weekend trips, school events. For Suri, the memories she clung to were blurry snapshots from before she turned 6. The last time she felt like her family was whole. After moving to New York, life became a quiet routine built entirely around her mother's protection. Katie walked her to school, cooked simple dinners, helped with homework, did everything she could to shield her from the nonstop attention that followed them. But there was one thing she couldn't block out: the silence. As years passed, Suri watched her father not as a daughter, but like some distant fan. She saw him hanging off skyscrapers, sprinting through action scenes, pulling off stunts no other actor would dare try. Every bookstore, every movie theater, his face was there. He was everywhere except in her life. And that absence grew heavier with every birthday that passed without a message, without a call, without even a small sign that he remembered the little girl he once called a miracle. When she turned 10, the questions inside her got sharper. Where is Dad? Slowly turned into, why doesn't he come? She tried telling herself he was just busy. Too busy saving the world on screen to show up in her real one. But even a child eventually figures out the difference between being busy and making a choice. By her early teens, she noticed her friends being picked up by their fathers after rehearsals or sports practice. She'd stand quietly at the curb, acting like she was cool with it, pretending it didn't sting. She grew into emotional independence, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. She rode the subway alone, finished projects by herself, carried her disappointments in silence so her mother wouldn't stress. Meanwhile, the media kept speculating. Reports in 2013 claimed Tom had only seen Suri once after the divorce. After that, no confirmed visits, no photos, nothing. To the public, it became another Hollywood mystery. To Suri, it was just her reality. A life shaped by a father who felt more like a rumor than a memory. And even through all that emptiness, she never learned how to hate him. Kids don't hate. They just ache. By the time Suri turned 14 in 2020, she was old enough to start searching for answers herself. She had grown up hearing fragments of adult conversations they thought she didn't catch. Whispers about Scientology, custody battles, rules, restrictions, control. That word stuck with her. For years, she didn't fully get it. But when the whole world shut down during the pandemic and she finally had time alone with her own thoughts, she started digging for the truth nobody had ever straight up explained to her. She read interviews, documentaries, and testimonies from former Scientology members. And even though she didn't know the full story, she suddenly saw herself between the lines, not mentioned by name, but as the collateral damage of a system she never signed up for. Former members had often talked about being discouraged from staying close to people outside the organization. Some even said relationships could get cut off completely if a family member left or refused to get involved. Suri was just a kid, not some threat, but she understood what outside meant. It meant distance. It meant separation. It meant a father who couldn't or wouldn't cross a line drawn by something bigger than love. And that realization shattered something inside her. She didn't grow up hating Tom Cruise. She grew up waiting on him, waiting for a birthday text, waiting for a visit, waiting for that one moment where he'd choose her over everything else. But the older she got, the more she realized she'd been standing in that doorway for 12 years, hoping to hear footsteps that were never coming back. At 15, she walked into the kitchen one morning and caught her mom quietly wiping her eyes after reading an article about Tom's latest blockbuster premiere. Suri didn't ask anything. She didn't have to. The truth between them was heavy, unspoken, and shared. Katie had been carrying the weight of her daughter's abandonment solo for years. Even then, Katie never trashed Tom, never used bitterness to shield Suri from reality. Instead, she held on to one belief. Some truths hit too hard to hand to a child before they're ready. And by 16, Suri was finally ready. Not for the media's version of the truth, but for her own. Finding her voice at 18. Turning 18 in April 2024 wasn't just another birthday for Suri. It was a breaking point. It was the moment the law finally saw her as someone who could make her own calls, speak her own truth, and define who she was without asking permission from anyone, including the man whose last name she'd carried her entire life. In the weeks before her birthday, she worked on her college application essays, pouring years of silence into words that shook even the admissions board. She wrote, "Sometimes we don't grow up with love. We grow up with the space that love leaves behind." It was the first time she'd ever said out loud, even privately, what she'd been feeling since she was 6. She didn't say her father's name. She didn't need to. The whole world knew who she meant. But for once, the story was hers, not the headlines. While other teens were throwing huge 18th birthday parties, Suri spent hers staring at her reflection, seeing a young woman who had spent half her life grieving someone who was still alive. She realized she didn't need to keep waiting for a call that never came, a hug that never showed up, or an explanation that was never going to happen. That day, she made a quiet but powerful choice. She would no longer carry the weight of being Tom Cruise's daughter. On May 17th, 2024, she signed the paperwork to change her name to Suri Noelle Holmes, taking her mother's middle name as a tribute to the woman who held it down through the storm alone. She thought she'd cry. She didn't. Instead, she felt relief. The kind that hits when you finally let go of a thread that's been hurting you the whole time. The world clocked the name change instantly. It showed up in her high school graduation program. It showed up on the cast list for her role in the Addams Family musical. Later, it appeared on her acceptance papers for Carnegie Mellon University, where she started majoring in fashion. Some people called it rebellion. Nah, it wasn't rebellion. It was freedom. The kind a girl earns after surviving 12 years of silence. Stepping into a life without his shadow. By the time Suri began her freshman year at Carnegie Mellon University in fall 2024, she had already completed the transformation she'd been building toward for years. She wasn't the little girl whose every move got photographed anymore. Not the girl the world pitted for growing up without her dad. Not the symbol of a Hollywood marriage people swore would last forever. She was just a young woman studying fashion, riding the Pittsburgh and New York subways like everybody else, finally living a life untouched by the pressure of her last name. Katie visited often, helping her settle in her dorm, carrying boxes with tired but thankful hands, smiling like a mother who knew she'd pulled off the impossible. She raised a daughter who survived fame, survived abandonment, survived the weight of a global celebrity's silence, and still turned into a grounded, kind, driven human being. In interviews, Katie only ever said one thing about her daughter. She's an incredible person. And honestly, Suri's strength came straight from her. Meanwhile, Tom Cruise kept living life at full throttle, filming massive franchises, prepping for a NASA-supported movie that would partly shoot in outer space, signing fresh multi-million-dollar deals, pulling off stunts that made people lose their minds. The world cheered every time he risked it all, on a helicopter, on a skyscraper, on a moving train. But what he never risked again was walking across a room to fix things with the little girl who once ran straight into his arms. Sources say he still covers her education and medical bills, just like the 2012 settlement required. But he hasn't been photographed with her in over a decade. And according to people close to the family, there haven't been private visits, no phone calls anyone knows about, and no real attempts to close that distance. Suri, now 19, has made peace with that silence. She doesn't expect him to show up anymore. She doesn't check her phone on her birthday. She doesn't stand in the doorway of her memory, waiting for a man who never comes back. Instead, she's building her own identity, her own dreams, her own future. The little girl who once cried into her hands now walks into adulthood with confidence, and with the name she chose. Suri Noelle Holmes. For the first time ever, the truth isn't something she's scared of. It's something she owns. Her story leaves one simple question. If you were in her shoes, would you reach out one more time, or finally let it go? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more untold stories.